The third and final step to effective communication is to understand that not all communication is created equal. Depending on the circumstances, the choice of what communication channel you choose will determine how effective or how efficient it will be. Some communication channels are preferable for different types of messages and different types of interactions, or for working with different types of people. So what we need to do before we just start getting out there and blasting emails to the entire company is to understand, okay, what are the mediums? When are they best used? What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the watchouts? That's what we're going to do here. Before we get started, just take a quick second to think about your own experiences with communication, right? How many email chains have you been involved with where a short conversation would have sufficed? How many meetings should have been a phone call? How often does a message receiver incorrectly interpret your tone or intention? How often was another person unaware of a message because an email was lost or deleted? All these things are very frustrating, and they only serve to perpetuate the communication challenge. Communication can either be a blessing or a curse. Poor communication often results from either a message sender choosing the incorrect channel or being sloppy in transmitting their message. The most common mistake that humans make is to assume that everything's equal or discount the cost-benefit relationship that goes into the decision-making process. We have to understand that for communication, mindfulness is a must. If we want to improve our communication efforts, individually and collectively, we all need to do the best to say, okay, what am I trying to get across? How should I do it? Was I effective? It doesn't take much for communication to just go out of hand, to go awry. That's why you always have to think before you do. Before we get started, read through the following questions as examples of the considerations that you want to take to best make use of your time and the time of others. You want to ask, who is this message intended for? What form of communication has the best cost-benefit relationship? Am I including unnecessary people or excluding critical people from this message? How important is the speed of this message? How important is the confidentiality of the message? Is there a chance that the message will not reach the receiver? Does this medium of communication support the level of detail in the message? How important is the confidentiality of the message? Is there a chance that the message will not reach the receiver? Does this medium of communication support the level of detail in the message? And finally, does the communication medium support the needs of all participants to have their voices heard? If you're going to be effective in communication, these are critical. So the first one we'll start with is email. So email is very common nowadays and probably the most misused. So real quick, the benefits are that it's fast, you can reach multiple people at the same time with the same message, you can structure complex ideas, and you're able to attach supplementary files. The cons is that email is easy to ignore, nuances of the message, such as sarcasm, can be misinterpreted, it can be impersonal, and the message can very easily be overlooked or deleted. Okay, so when do you use email? You want to use email when uniformity of communication and mass communication is necessary, or a chain of related messages is essential for context, or the same message needs to reach multiple people, or urgency is not paramount. There's a few more guidelines and best practices below. You want to avoid using email for any sort of sensitive topics. As a general rule, always assume that your message will be forwarded to someone probably who you didn't want to read it. So never put anything derogatory or something that may make you look bad in the email. Assume that everyone in the company will read your emails. Make sure that the title of your email is specific, and avoid using email to discuss an issue in depth. If there's an issue that requires a lot of depth, there's probably a different and better communication channel to use. When you're communicating, keep in mind that factual information is best communicated in writing, because most people only retain a small percentage of the facts when communicated verbally. You want to be sure to communicate factual information in writing. A lot of people have trouble remembering conversations and facts and to-dos, and those things get lost. So if you need people to have a record of who's going to do what and by when, so that stuff doesn't get lost, people know what's going on, email's a good choice. You send an email doesn't mean that your message was received or correctly interpreted. Emails should also be quickly scannable to the eye and should be readable in under 30 or 60 seconds. Summarize key points or action items for recipients in the body of your email. You want to share lengthy or dense information in attachments. And keep in mind, if your message takes longer than 60 seconds, try a different path. One of my favorite uses for email is that it's a great way to close the loop and define who does what by when. If you have a long chain of communication and you need everyone to have a final written record of what was decided, what is going to be done, who's going to do it, and when we're going to do it, this is something you can point back to time and time again to say, you saw it, you read it, you didn't disagree, that means you agree. Phone call. So the benefits of the phone call are that you can quickly share ideas and words, you can facilitate a personal connection with another person, and the full attention of participants is required in the conversation. The cons of a phone call are that the call strength can vary and a limited number of participants can be on the line before the effectiveness starts to decrease. Another con of the phone call is that you might catch someone unprepared for the conversation if they did not know you're going to call, so your message may not be very effective. The third con for phone calls is that you really need to focus to remember the critical points in the conversation or take notes throughout, because the time that you're done, you might have forgotten or missed a few things. Best practices are to use phone calls when speed is critical. You can reach someone in a second. Discretion and written records may not be desired or required, or you want to build a relationship. Hearing someone's voice is a great way to get a more intimate connection with them. You can get across a tone a lot better, so that's why people prefer phone calls. For video calls, in our modern COVID world, a video call is very popular. I'm sure we know that it's very quickly to share your ideas and words. You can facilitate a personal connection with the other person. You can do the voice plus facial expressions, kind of like the phone, but a little bit better. You're able to share your computer screens and collaborate, and it's cheaper than the cost of travel. You don't have to go fly to see somebody. You can just show them what you're working on right there as you are. And the fourth benefit is that you can record conversations now for any participant's benefit. Cons of the video call are that call strength can vary like the phone, and if you have too many people, the effectiveness won't be there. And there might be an additional cost to video tools, and people have to get used to it. It's a newer technology. I'm sure we've all been on calls where people can't figure out what button to click for 10, 15 minutes. You want to use video calls when collaborating with a team who is not in the same location. And also when you want to focus on relationship building. And third, when each person is comfortable with the tool and can access it easily. The next communication medium is in person. In person is great if you're looking for a deeply personal way of reaching somebody. The benefit is that you can have someone read your body language and emotions, and it goes the other way around. And this is a great way to build trust and transparency. In a conversation, you have to have your full attention. If someone's looking around or the half there, it's really obvious. Unlike a phone call, you remember more. In-person conversations also lead to conversations that may have more tangents. You might go down different paths, and then you can lead to a conclusion, because usually you don't want to walk away without something being finished. The cons of an in-person conversation are that they can be slow. It can be time-consuming. Conversations, as Machiavelli once quipped, are like wars. They begin when you will, but they do not end when you please. I think we've all been stuck with someone who just won't stop talking. Con number 3 is that you want to find an appropriate time for this sort of thing. Not everyone is ready to talk when you are, so just make sure that you arrange, when they're free and they'll have enough time with the conversation. You want to use this when you want to really build a good relationship and when time is not of concern. If there's any sort of really emotional content, in person's the way to go. And then the last but not least is meetings. The first 3 benefits are that you're able to communicate and collaborate with multiple people in person at the same time. It's an opportunity to problem solve together. They're usually structured for a longer period of time. And you're able to build alignment on topic because you have everyone in the same room. The cons are that this is a very expensive way to communicate. You have a lot of people in the same place, they can't escape. The structure and planning must be in place for an effective meeting. If there's not a structure, meetings will quickly devolve into tangents, or someone might have an agenda that they'll push. So you need to know what you want to achieve. Beware of the loudest people in the room dominating the conversation. The fourth con is that unless takeaways are written down, decisions might not be agreed upon if they're not recorded and then sent afterward to all the participants. And then you want to use meetings when collaboration and intention are essential. A discussion needs to occur from the perspective of multiple stakeholders and a decision is required. And I have a few more notes here because meetings have such a bad rap to them. If you want to improve meetings, there's a few things that you can do that I do and I've seen other really effective business professionals do. Here they are. First thing you want to do is clarify the purpose of the meeting and what needs to be accomplished. Set a goal-based agenda. 2, send out this agenda and any materials at least a day ahead of the meeting. Any type of attachments or supporting information, send, attach, make sure people get it. If you need to, confirm with them. When you're in the meeting, don't allow people to sidetrack and use their computer or use their phone. Only let the presenter or a note taker have their computer out. Number 4, request that phones are muted and put away. If they're not, they're a distraction, they steal effectiveness. Number 5, get the right people in the room. If they're going to distract or take away from the effectiveness, get them out of there. 6, designate a leader and a facilitator to keep things on track. 7, begin on time. If you start late, this will signal to others that your time is more valuable than theirs, and it works the other way around. This can be pretty insulting if you have a meeting and someone casually saunters in 10 minutes late. It doesn't set the right message. 8, manage the interactions. 9, watch the time. 10, spell out the next steps. 11, send out the notes and action items right after the meeting. When the meeting's done, there should be no sort of ambiguity between who needs to do what and by when, or what's been decided. This is a great place to do what's known as close the loop. Get all the loose ends and bring them together. No matter what you choose to do, you can do some variation of what's above or your own thing. Just find some sort of ground rules that work for you and your organization. The final point that I want to emphasize with these 3 rules for great communication is that good communication is conscious communication. You want to find the best way to communicate with people and get all the distractions out of the way. If you can, you want to always make sure that someone has received the message, they understand the message, and they can articulate back to you what, who will do what, and by when. Be explicit and be transparent as possible in your communication. If you can do these things, you will keep poor communication at bay and lead a life of great communication.